Welcome again to Progressive Cattleman's booth here at NCBA, Convention and Trade Show from Nashville, Tennessee. We are very pleased to be joining Jason Ahola, who is an associate professor in beef production systems at Colorado State University and a frequent contributor to Progressive Cattleman. Jason, thank you for being here today.
Sure, glad to be here.
We heard a lot here at this conference about herd expansion and why it's so necessary at this stage. Your discussions with producers, why do you tell them and do you indicate the necessity of herd expansion and why it's so important looking ahead in these next few years?
Yeah, unlike most recent times, it's really crucial that we expand. I think number one, this is a chance for ranches to capitalize on profits they've never seen before and really put some equity back into ranching. It's been so long since it's been this profitable to raise calves. Probably most importantly, it's important for feed yards and packing plants to have access to more feeder cattle. They're running at less than full conditions, and their cost structures just don't allow that to be done over long periods of time. So I think potentially feed yards going out of business or closing some of their feed yards, or also packing plants closing plants, and that's the infrastructure of our industry. Those plants don't come back online. And then ultimately, I think the other one is as we reduce inventory and we have less beef out there, the price of it at retail goes higher and higher and higher, and it gets closer to things like lobster. And that's truly an elite product, and I don't think we want beef to be there. We still want it to be the center of the plate. If we have less of it and it costs more for a consumer to buy it, it's not going to be in the center of the plate for very long.
Here at the NCBA convention, we've heard from Bob Langer, the VP for Sustainability, and making this announcement that the fast food chain has done this year, that they would like all sustainable beef by 2016. If a producer were to say today, we are sustainable, we have made so much progress towards sustainability in land and water, resources, economics, and yet this, maybe not, they don't call it a mandate, but it may feel like a mandate. What's the incentive for a producer to jump on board with a company like McDonald's as it tries to make this pursuit?
One of the biggest challenges with sustainability to me is that it means different things to different people. Sometimes it's economic, sometimes it's social, sometimes it's environmental. There's an argument that it's all three of those, and I think even McDonald's is trying to figure out what that really means to a consumer. But I think there is becoming some demand in the marketplace for sustainable beef, but there's no true dollars out there today. And I think it's one of these things, the entire industry needs to move that direction further to be able to be making consumers happy and consuming beef at the same level that they have been. And if our producers don't respond, beef consumption is going to decline. But the direct dollars and cents, there's a pretty big gap there that I think honestly someone is going to have to lead in the marketplace with an incentive or a premium. If you can verify some aspects of sustainability, that you will benefit financially.
As long as the consumer pays also and forwards that dollar on back to the producers.
Historically, the beef consumer, generally, some of them pay more money for natural or organic or other, added value. Most of them are price shoppers, and they're not going to pay more for sustainability. So that's something to be determined.
Dr. Hull, you work so much with beef quality assurance, and tell me what has been some of the more contributing factors to getting more producers on board with BQA compliance.
BQA has been around since the 1980s, and early on it was very urgent because it was addressing some drug residue types of issues. But then over a number of years, it's really just focused on beef quality, marbling, reducing defects, a lot of those things. And we've done some survey work, and it appears most people participate in BQA simply because they think it's the right thing to do. And it's just they think that's what they owe the industry, is to follow those guidelines. In the end, most producers are not BQA certified, although most producers do follow practices and procedures consistent with BQA. So it's a little bit hard to really know how well or how much we don't have our producers following BQA. I think over time it's going to be probably more driven in the marketplace in terms of a verification of procedures consistent with BQA, particularly things like animal welfare.
One of the presentations here from Tyson kind of saying that sometimes the consumer views the treatment of animal welfare and BQA compliance as perhaps a little less credibility because it's voluntary, whereas not mandatory. Now, on the flip side, the producer would say that's the benefit of it. It is voluntary. I'm jumping into this program.
That's a great one, and you know, this industry, unlike most industries in the United States, is not in favor of regulation. Most industries probably aren't either, but certainly cattlemen, they want their distance, and you can't blame them. I mean, we'd sure like everything to be driven by a marketplace and capitalism, and you know, that's something that's sort of figuring its way out. Tyson has this farm check welfare program. Whole Foods has Global Animal Partnership, which is a welfare auditing system, and unfortunately they have different standards. And I do think the industry is at a spot where beef quality assurance, BQA, and the welfare guidelines could serve as the backbone that's consistent across all of these programs. I'm not sure as an industry we're going to be able to all get that done. And so there may be competing programs, and hopefully eventually that will result in a market-driven solution. I don't think we're going to see regulation other than some of these things like bans on tail docking or other practices that are occurring on ranches that consumers are more concerned about, and some legislation is starting to be developed to address those.
Looking at beef production this year and perhaps into 2015, how much does the elimination, or perhaps just the suspension, we should call it, of a beta agonist, how much does that affect the total sum of beef production that we're seeing in fed cattle?
That's an interesting thing. When for instance, beta agonist went off the market last September, a lot of the cattle that were slaughtered after that, those cattle were placed by a feed yard assuming they would have access to that beta agonist. And so in their break-evens and the days on feed and the carcass weights going out the door, that was all calculated in. So there was a period of time those feed yards lost out on that technology, and they didn't make as much money on those cattle, or they lost more money because of that. I think over the future with things like beta agonists, it's certainly a challenge to see where that's going to land. I think as we have a decline in cattle numbers and only one beta agonist on the market, average carcass weight is lower than it otherwise would have been. And right now we could use more carcass weight, honestly. We don't want bigger carcasses, but the more beef we can produce, the better. And so it goes back to this herd expansion thing. And if we can't expand very rapidly, and we're also a little bit of lacking efficiency in a feed yard, it's kind of a double hit.
Dr. Jason Ahola from Colorado State University, we appreciate him being here, and look ahead to more video from Progressive Cattleman at NCBA.